Hey losers, I'm Coral. Welcome to my channel. If you're joining me for the first time, I typically read horror, but I kind of dabble in all things weird and spooky. So if you're into that, welcome to the party. Today, I am doing the second part of my 2024 favorites. In this video, I'm going to be talking about traditionally published horror books. When I say my favorites from 2024, I don't necessarily mean that these were published in 2024, although we do have some 2024 horrors on this list. Probably most of them were published previous to last year. There are just too many books out there for me to read. I can't just stick to 2024 releases. So these are in no particular order. However, I'm going to be saving what I think is probably my favorite of the year for the very end. So these are all great, but I think there's one that's like just kind of changed the way I look at books a little bit. So let's get into this. We're going to start out with a vintage horror novel. This is The Forbidden Garden by Ursula Curtis, and this was published in 1962. This is a fun book because you're following this main character, Mrs. Marvel. She is out there committing mad crimes. Her con right now is that she is soliciting kind of like home companions to they kind of move in, they kind of care for her a little bit, and she gets them to sign away all of their belongings basically, and then they go missing. So who's there to benefit? It's Mrs. Marvel. And by missing, I mean she is digging giant holes, putting the bodies in, and then having her gardener plant trees in these holes where the dead bodies are. Of course, the gardener isn't in on it, but it's like, aren't you a little bit suspicious, dude? Okay, so Mrs. Marvel, she's a criminal. She's a murderess. And sometimes when people are doing bad things, they get very suspicious that the people around them are also doing bad things. So when she has this new companion, Mrs. Marvel suspects that this woman might be trying to con her and murder her possibly. So she's very suspicious of this new companion. She's very suspicious of like her only family member, her nephew. She's suspicious of this young woman who has moved into a property close to Mrs. Marble's home, kind of as a tenant of Mrs. Marble. She's suspicious of this lady for some reason. She has a lot of suspicion. And are any of these suspicions founded? Possibly. You'll have to read it and find out. Next on my list, a 2024 release. This is Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay. I know this is not going to be a favorite for everybody. I think his books are divisive, honestly. I think a lot of that has to do with their endings, and this one is very strange and ambiguous. This follows narrator. I'm not sure if we ever find out what his name is, but this person in his young adult years and like his college years took part in an indie movie where he played a character called the Thin Kid, and this movie was never actually released because there was a death on set. However, years and years later, someone puts out a couple, like, I can't remember if they're stills or just like really short clips of this. They put it out on the internet and it like gains this cult following somehow. People are like obsessed with this, even though no one's ever actually seen this movie. But now, in the present day, the Thin Kid, the Thin Man, I guess, now, the Thin Man is helping create like a remake of this. For real, like with an actual director and a studio and a producer and all those things. And you're getting the story of what happened in the past on set. It seems like these kids like got caught up in something bigger than them almost. And of course there is the death on the set, like what happened, who died, what happened. There's rumors about like violence and cannibalism and things like that. But are they true? You kind of don't know because you're getting the tale of this movie, this past movie, and you're getting the present day kind of side by side. So you don't really know what actually happened in the movie until near the end of the book. And so it's very compelling. And the end is seriously weird. I don't, like, what is my theory of what happened? I don't fucking know. It's just weird. Next is another weird one. This is Invisible Monsters by Chuck Palahniuk, published in 1999. And this we're following a former model who is a former model because while driving one day, there's an injury to her face. She quickly drives to the hospital, and while they're kind of like triaging her, I don't know, like doing the emergency services that she needs, nobody has gone out to collect the bits of her face that were in her car. So birds came in and ate those bits. So now she says, birds ate my face, which is the best thing. So funny. So she has this facial deformity now, and she wears a veil. She can't really speak in a way that people can understand her, and it's changed her life dramatically, as you might expect. But she gets in with this woman called the Princess Brandy Alexander, who is really good at conning people. Another con story, I guess. And really the story goes somewhere very strange. It's one of those books that starts at the end at first, and so you're just kind of thrown in and you're like, I don't know what all these people have to do with each other. Like, why are they hurting each other? But then you go back to the past and make your way slowly to the present again and find out how all these people are connected in very strange ways. It's just very funny. Just honestly, the funniest book I read this year. So quotable, so strange. She's wearing a dress that's a copy of the Shroud of Turin in the very beginning, which I find just great. It says, it's that knockoff print of the Shroud of Turin, most of it brown and white, draped and cut so the shiny red buttons all button through the stigmata. It's like, what the fuck? It's just so great. I love that book so much. Then we have The Return by Rachel Harrison, written in 2020. This is her debut novel, I believe, and I was a little bit nervous because I did not read her publications in order, and then I was like, am I gonna like her debut? But joke's on me, because I think this is my favorite of her books that she's written. We're following a group of friends who met in college, and now it's, you know, years out. They've kind of, you know, they don't live near each other anymore. Their lives have gone on separate from each other, so they've grown a little bit apart, but still try to get together now and then. And they're having one of these get-togethers, but it's under different circumstances because one of the friends, Julie, was missing for a period of time, like a long period of time, presumed dead, but then she shows up out of nowhere and has no idea what happened to her while she was gone. Which is suspicious. Does she actually know? Who knows? She seems to, like, be really forthright at first. Most people want to believe her, but her best friend, Elliis, is like, there's something suspicious about this. And it gets even more suspicious when Julie shows up to this get-together at this strange hotel where they have themed rooms, which plays a part in the story. I think that part was really fun. And there's something, like, obviously wrong with Julie, but no one wants to come out and say it. They're all, like, worried about hurting her feelings. Like, can she control these things that are happening to her? Is she just falling apart? She's obviously been through something traumatic, but, like, what's going on? You have to read it to find out. But I thought that this was a lot of fun, a book about, like, friendship, this weird hotel, this mystery surrounding what happened to Julie. What's wrong with her? Why is she fucking smelly? And, oh, it was great. It was a lot of fun to read. Next, a book written in 1991. This is American Psycho by Bret Easton Elliis. I'm not going to go too far into this. if you'd like to hear me go too far into this, you can watch my first video in this series that I'm hoping to do once a month, where I talk about one of my 50 favorite horror books. This was the very first one. I'll leave a little clicker to that. And what else? This is about Patrick Bateman, a man who works on Wall Street. He's interested in things like fashion and music and new technology. He eats out at fine dining establishments. He likes to do drugs, and he also likes to commit random acts of serious violence. So this one, definitely like check content warnings, because there's a lot of mean things happening in this book. Like, if you think the movie is violent, it's like, this is turned up to 10. But it's also hilarious somehow, like amidst these violent acts. It's so funny. How does it work like that? Like, there's this part where he comes out of a club with a woman, and she's wearing sunglasses at night, which a lot of people seem to do in this book. They're just like always wearing sunglasses. But this woman is a model, and you just got out of a scene where they don't seem very intelligent, but there is lightning in the sky, and she keeps saying, "Who's taking photographs? Patrick, stop them!" And it's like so funny. He tells her like, it's not a photographer, it's lightning, and she's like, "Patrick, make them stop!" And it's just so funny. It's so funny. Next, coming out of 2018, we have Foe by Iain Reid. This is a book that blends a lot of genres, kind of horror, kind of thriller, kind of science fiction, kind of dystopian. And in this, we're following a couple. What are their names? Oh yeah, Junior and Henrietta. In the very beginning, these people who live kind of a secluded, quiet life in the country get a strange visitor. And this visitor tells them that Junior has been chosen to go to space for a year. This is a lottery, kind of a government program. And he's been chosen. And he's really not sure how to feel about this. He's going to be gone for a significant amount of time in space, which is terrifying. But the man says, like, don't worry. We're going to send a companion to live with your wife while you're gone. And that's the problem. This man is studying this couple to make sure that this companion is perfect for his wife, Henrietta. And things get strange while this is happening. But I found this to be really good, very, I almost don't want to say twisty, because that makes it feel like there's a gimmick, but it's like unpredictable, I feel. And just so good. Like, I read this at the beginning, like, I think this might have been the first book I finished, the first or the second book that I finished in 2024, and I thought about it for like the entire fucking year. It was very weird in a great way. Next, there's a 2023 release, Sister Maiden Monster by Lucy A. Snyder. This was an apocalyptic novel that gets into some cosmic horror, which I don't typically like, but this was like, I don't know, cosmic horror in a way that I like, I guess. It wasn't about like, oh, these indescribable things, you know, it was describable and very weird. But in this, we're following 3 different women at like different times in this apocalypse. Like, one we're following when it first breaks out, another we're following as they're like navigating through what's going on, and then the third is like the apocalypse has been going on for quite some time. And each woman was really interesting. The things that were happening in their lives were very interesting. This gets very graphic. I remember a part where like I had to put it down and stop reading because it was gross in a way I've never like been grossed out before. And even thinking about it now, I'm like, I just ate lunch and my stomach's like, we can't think about this right now or I'm gonna like throw up. Yeah, I mean, there's just really not very many books where that's happened to me before. I think Zombie by Joyce Carol Oates did that, and this book did that. I'm sure there are more if I really sat down and put some thought into it, but yeah, this was It was a doozy. Next, there is Diavola by Jennifer Thorne. This was a 2024 release, and this is a story about a toxic family who goes on vacation to Italy. But not just that, it's also about this haunted, like, villa that they stay in while on vacation. So you're getting two different kinds of horror. The horror of having a terrible fucking family, and the horror of what is in this creepy tower, in this creepy house, and how do we escape it? Is it escapable? This was just so good. I want to reread it. It's like oh my god, you're so frustrated with this stinking family. And then another part that I really loved about this was that it comes to a place where you think that this is going to be the natural conclusion of the story, but it's obviously not, because there's more story to go. And it pushes things in a direction I didn't suspect. So it was great. I love this one. Another 2024 release. This is Such Lovely Skin by Tatiana Schlote-Bonne. This was a YA book that doesn't really read like YA to me. Although the characters are teenagers, I didn't feel like things got too teenagery for me in a way that it's like, I can't relate to this, and so it's boring. This one was so compelling. One of those books where I started reading it and then I was like, don't fucking talk to me, family. I didn't say it like that, but I was like, please stop needing things from me because I have important things to do, and it's called finishing this fucking book. But this is about a amateur Twitch streamer named Viv who's trying to make it big. She's coming back to Twitch after a hiatus because she had a death in her family. It was her young sister who died really tragically while Viv was babysitting her, and Viv has lied about exactly what happened and about her involvement in it. So she's harboring this like terrible, terrible secret. She's not told a single person about this. Before getting back on Twitch and live streaming herself playing video games, because that's what she likes to do, she does horror games, she thinks, you know, I'm just gonna have a run through at this game so I have a little bit of practice before I get on again. And she opens up this indie game she hasn't heard of before, but someone emailed her and suggested it. And in the game, there's this NPC, and it like is basically telling her that to progress in the game, she has got to tell this NPC a secret. So she kind of flubs it at first. She's like, you know, like something dumb like, I had a crush on so-and-so in 3rd grade. You know, something silly like that. But it like knows that she's not telling the truth. And it's like, no, you need to tell me a big secret. So she types out to this NPC what happened with her sister, and it lets her go forward with the game. But then after that, these strange things start happening in Viv's life, and it's like somebody is pretending to be her online and in real life, and this person is doing bad things, like things that could ruin her reputation, get her in trouble, and hurt people. And Viv knows that she's not doing it. And like, who is this and how is this happening? It seems impossible. I just really had such a great time with it. And it's just like a really fucking beautiful book. It's got this beautiful hardcover with my finger smudges on it. It was a delight to read. Next on my list is a thick book. This might be the longest one. Oh, I don't know. There's another one that's long. I don't know comparatively, but I think this might be the longest book on this list. And it is so fucking worth it. This is A Child Alone with Strangers by Philip Fracassi. This was published in 2022, and I saw a lot of people talking about it before I picked it up, but I hadn't read any Philip Fracassi when this came out. It was really last year that I read my first book by him and was like, oh my god, and now I've read a couple and he just wows me. Like, definitely one of my new favorite authors. This one is a huge story about this little boy named Henry who survived a terrible car accident, and because of that he had settlement money. But now he is orphaned. He lives with his aunt and uncle, if I'm remembering correctly, and because of this settlement money, there is a group of criminals who like make this plot to kidnap him for ransom money. And so that happens. He gets kidnapped by this group of criminals and taken to this secluded house surrounded by woods. But Henry has some special abilities, some maybe preternatural abilities. And not only that, but this house was abandoned by humans. But there was like some sort of non-human entity living in it. And because these people are in its house now, it starts to, you know, do things to drive them out. And each thing gets worse and worse. So Henry is like stuck in the middle of this. He can't leave this house. These criminals don't want to leave this house because they have this plan. And like, will Henry survive this? It's so good. Another one where I'm like thinking about it and I'm like, I've got to reread this ASAP. It's long, but it's worth it. It feels like, and not to take away from any of Philip Fracassi's writing abilities, because I've loved his books, but the story itself almost seems like a Stephen King novel. And I personally think that that's a huge compliment, but also like not to take away from his writing abilities, because he's got writing chops and I love reading his books. It really is such a joy. My next book, another 2024 release. This is The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monika Kim. This is following a Korean American young woman named Ji-won who is in college, and Ji-won's family is like falling apart. Her father has recently revealed that he's been having an affair and leaves the family, and her mother is like despondent about this, but she's slowly starting to get back to things. Ji-won and her younger sister are like really grateful, but then they find out that the mother has this boyfriend, and they meet the boyfriend and he's like super sleazy. Really, a lot of the story is just like all the men just failing her. But the big thing is Ji-won's mom puts together a dish of fish, a fish dish, and talks about how eating the eyes are great luck. So Ji-won tries this and becomes kind of obsessed with the texture of the eye. And when she meets the mom's new boyfriend, he has really striking blue eyes. And for some reason that catches her and she becomes obsessed with the thought of eating this man's eyes. You know, some of these compulsions can't be held back. This was a book where it's like, you're with this character committing acts of violence and you're like so concerned about her and worried that she's going to get caught. But also you're like kind of rooting her on because like some of these people in this story are treating her so poorly. And so it's like a kind of like a female rage story, kind of a good for her story. And the end is bananas. This is another one kind of like Diavola where you think it's come to a natural conclusion, but it goes even further. And oh my God, it was great. It was great. Another 2024 release. This is A Better World by Sarah Langan. And this feels so much like her excellent novel, Good Neighbors. One of my favorites. This is another one set in this like semi-dystopian world, but one that feels so close to our own that it's troubling. It's like, this could be where we are in 10 years. This world, there's just like pollution and just like food shortages, climate issues, and where this family lives now, they're affected by all those things. So when they get the opportunity to move to a company town, with her husband, who's, I don't know, like an engineer or something like that. They're like so grateful when they like get accepted by the town, because they kind of had to do like some interviews and things like that. They're grateful, like this place has everything, like the air is clear and there's food, and they get this nice house after living like in an apartment for years and years and years because it's so expensive. Despite all those great things, the community itself is kind of strange. They're really kind of ostracized at first until the wife, Linda, gets in with this group of women who run some sort of community thing, and she befriends them, but at the expense of another woman almost, although Linda doesn't know this at first, and things just get really weird. They're obsessed with these like giant white birds that poop everywhere, like giant geese or something, and each family has to like have one in its yard. And the community itself, there's just like weird propaganda. It's almost like they're following some sort of religion, and things just get very, very strange. But it is such a great book. Another one that was just like, it was so fun to read and discover what's happening, because you're like, these people are so weird, and some of them are even weirder than others, and like there's something definitely sinister going on behind the scenes, but you're not sure what until you find out, and then you're like, what the? Next, I'd like to tell you about All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. This was released in 2023, and this is more of a crime thriller novel, but it's very dark and gritty, just like Cosby's other stuff, except for I think this one gets even darker and even grittier. And we start out here with a sheriff named Titus who works in Virginia, a small county in Virginia. It's like one of those places where everyone knows everyone. They've lived here for generations, kind of a thing. But there is this terrible act of violence that happens where a young man shoots a school teacher. They're not sure why this would happen, but things get really dark, and it's like, it starts out as something, and then it gets deeper, and then it gets deeper, and then you uncover another layer, and it goes further and further and further, and it's great. For me, I thought that this was really reminiscent of the first season of True Detective, if you've seen that. There are some like really deep Southern Gothic-y vibes in this. There is religion in this, and it's almost like folksy, but this was a great book. All of them were great, but I can't help myself from saying it after each one. It was a great book. Then we have another 2023 release. This is Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. This is a novella. It goes down so quick. And this is about a woman named Rose. She's relocated herself to Florida after like a bad breakup. She's a teacher, and she's struggling with being single and like finding herself, because that's something she feels like she's never had the opportunity to do, because she gets in relationships, and then she's all about these relationships instead of like being about herself in a relationship. So one day, Rosemary meets this like really enchanting woman named Ash at the local farmer's market, and Ash makes like home goods. Like she's got baked goods, she's got like candles, things like that, all from things she's grown on her own little hobby farm. And Rosemary's like, oh, she thinks Ash's cupcakes are like so good, but then she starts to realize that she doesn't just like Ash's cupcakes and like maybe want to be Ash's friend. She like has a crush on Ash, which is something surprising to her because she's always considered herself straight, but now she's not sure. And her and Ash start a relationship, but Ash is like very secretive and protective of her private space and her past and things like that. And you gotta wonder why. Then Mongrels, published in 2016. This is by Stephen Graham Jones. And this one is definitely more literary horror. It's slower paced. We're following a family in particular a teen boy who I don't think he's ever named in this, but he lives with his aunt and uncle who are twins. He's always lived with his family, but his mother died when she was giving birth to him. So he's never known his mother. He just has, what he knows about her is what his aunt and uncle have told him. But he also knows that he is from a family of werewolves, and he should be going through the change himself soon. But it's just like not happening. And no one is really sure why. Will he ever turn? He should, but like he's also worried about this because he wants to have these experiences his family has had because he really admires his family and he wants to know, he wants to fit in that way and stuff like that. You're following this family and they're a little bit transitory. They have to move a lot because of their werewolf shit, and so it's like he doesn't have the opportunity to make friends really because they're moving around so much. And so all he has is his aunt and his uncle, and it's just a great story. One that like lifted my heart at the end somehow, even though it's a horror story. And at times it's also very like sad and emotional, but like the end was just really nice. And sometimes you need that. Not all the time, but sometimes. Next is another 2023 release. This is Black River Orchard by Chuck Wendig, and I think this is my favorite Chuck Wendig book. I think this is it so far. I've read quite a few of his. How many have I read? There's 5 in the Miriam Black series, two Wanderers books, so that's 7, 8. I've read at least 8 of his books, and this is my favorite so far. And this, you're not gonna believe it, is about evil apples. Apples that make people behave badly. This is an apple book, and it was so good. How did he write a horror book about apples? Well, he wrote it well. In this, we're following a man named Dan, also his teenage daughter Calla, mostly, although I believe there are other POVs like stuck in there, but for the most part we're following Dan and Calla. And Dan owns this little farm, and he is, this season has grown a crop of apple that's like a heritage apple. So you don't really, it's like this breed of apple has been lost, and now he's grown it again. And it's back into distribution in a small area. But this apple is like the most delicious apple he's ever eaten. It's like so dark red, it's almost black. And it's just delicious. And people go people go bananas over these apples. And they start to do things, bad things, to get their hands on these apples. Yeah, so like what is wrong with this apple? It almost creates like a cult of people around this apple. I don't really know what more to say about it except for that this book could have gone on and I would have read more of it. I like could not get enough of it. It's quite long, but I felt like all the parts were necessary, and maybe that's like me just really loving this book so much, but it was great. It was a book about apples. There's apple facts in it, real apple facts, which are very interesting. And I just never thought I would read a book about people doing terrible things to get their hands on apples. But I did, and it was so good. Okay, second from last book. Holy cow. I've been talking for hours. This next one is a 2024 release. This is Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. This is his newest release, and I know not everyone loved this one, but this book's like frightened me at night when I was reading it. I had an ARC copy of this, so I was reading it on my Kindle at night, and I was like on my side reading with my back facing the doorway in my bedroom. It was dark out, obviously. I was reading by Kindle light, and this thing happened, And all of a sudden, like, it felt like there was something in my room, you know? And I had to, like, very scaredly peep over my shoulder, like, towards the doorway, towards, like, the dark corner of my room behind me to make sure that there was nothing there. Like, it just really spooked me in a way that doesn't happen very often. And I love that feeling. And so it's like really special when it happens, I feel like. In this book, we're following, how old is she? Because one thing I will say is that she feels younger than her actual age. She's 8 years old. She doesn't read quite like an 8-year-old. She reads more like a 5 or 6-year-old, I would say. We're following Bella and her mother and father. Bella's an only child, and she can tell her parents are sometimes having a hard time. She can sense that, even though they're not like telling her this, but you know, kids pick up on things. And she's the only child, right? So like, she doesn't always get a ton of, like, when I say age appropriate, I just mean like, she doesn't really have playmates, right? She just has her parents. And I feel bad because reading this kind of made me be like, oh, my daughter. Like, this is also my poor little daughter, although she says she likes being an only child. But anyway, Bella has made a playmate, kind of. It's this woman who lives in her closet, and the woman asks her to call her Other Mommy. And at first, Other Mommy was like really fun and cool. But then Other Mommy started getting like kind of spookier and spookier. And Other Mommy has asked Bella if she could go into Bella's heart. And Bella knows, like, she knows, like, bodily autonomy, right? And she's like, no, you can't do that. This is my body, and I don't want you to do that. And after that, Other Mommy got even scarier. And now Bella's, like, worried about upsetting Other Mommy. And Other Mommy has, kind of escalated things in their house. Yeah, I thought that this was so cleverly written, especially because it's not one of those stories where someone is trying to convince other people about this thing that they've seen, and like, that's all you spend the whole entire book or movie, you know, with them trying to convince people. Like, it's not that. And I think that's what made this so entertaining. And boy, there's just like multiple very spooky scenes in this, and I can't wait to reread it. It was, I just really liked it. I thought it was so good. And now the grand finale. This book came out in 2019, and I've had it for quite a few years. I just let it sit on my shelf. I thought the cover was interesting, but for some reason I just let it sit. I'm not even sure if I really knew what it was about. I picked it up in October. This is Blood Sugar by Daniel Kraus, and this is my favorite book that I read this year. It's written in a way that is so different than anything else I've read. The characters are sympathetic, even though they're about to do something atrocious. You just gotta wonder, where are the parents? Where are the parents in this story? But you know where they are, and it's really sad. Like, I don't know. It just made me feel a lot of feelings. But this is about young boy named Jody. I'm not sure if we get his exact age, but to me it felt like late middle school years. Jody brings his little sister along with him everywhere. She's his foster sister, but he doesn't really see her quite that way. In fact, he's like very protective of her and wants to make sure that she's enjoying herself too, but she's suffered some trauma, and that's obviously reflected in like her behavior. And Jody himself like hasn't had a great home life either. They've been hanging out at this like grown man's house who's also suffered trauma. And when you think, you know, children hanging out with an adult, you think creepy shit is going on, but it's not quite like that. Luckily, I think that this man, as a result of what's happened to him in his own life, kind of has some like stunted maturity, almost like arrested development, where he never progressed into his adult years, almost his maturity level. So he kind of acts like, you know, the big shot with the kids, but he doesn't always act like an adult. So you wonder, like, what's happened? Is his name Robbie? You wonder what's happened to Robbie. Yes, what's happened to Robbie? Why is he like this? Why is he hanging out with children? There's another, like, teen girl who starts hanging out with Jody when she starts going to a school. Jody has a huge crush on her. She's very smart. And so you also wonder, like, why is this girl who is not like Jody, comes from a wealthier family. She was going to, like, a private school at some point, I believe. So, like, their status is much different than Jody's family status. And the status of this man, Robbie, like, his house is a crazy dump. Why is this, like, girl hanging out with these people? But the whole crux of the story is that Robbie wants to get back at his community for ostracizing him and for treating kids like Jody and, oh God, what is Jody's? Midge, I think they call her? Yes, he calls her a midge. So, oh my God, I totally lost my thought. Treating, I think it was saying, Robbie wants to get back at the community for treating him poorly for years and also for treating kids like Jody and Midge badly when it's, like, not their fault that their life has turned out this way. And they're only kids still. So they come up with this idea to hand out poisoned candy at Halloween. And they're all in on this, though. It's not like Robbie's hiding this. They have a plan and they're gonna do it. So this takes place leading up to Halloween. Part of it takes place on Halloween, so it's a perfect October book, a perfect Halloween book. And you just have to wonder why. Like, why would they do this? But I think that the most compelling thing about this book is Jody and the way that this is written, as if Jody is real and as if Jody is telling us the story. The language is weird. Because Robbie doesn't like him to use curse words, he has substituted other words for this, so other words for swear words. So at first you're like, what is going on? And I feel like there's almost a little bit of a learning curve at first, but I think that, like, lends itself to being even more immersive because you feel like you're getting this story not from Daniel Kraus, but from Jody. And, like, I don't know, Jody's such an enigmatic character. He's obsessed with Lord of the Rings. He's just kind of a weird kid, but in a way that's, like, kind of sad and endearing. This was so good. This book was so good. I finished it and I immediately was like, I'm gonna reread this. The most well-written Daniel Kraus book I've read. I've read a couple of his, and for the most part I like his books, but this was a fucking masterpiece. It was my favorite book of the year. I mean, look at all these. Like, I had like 35 5-star reads this year. This was number one. So, once again, thank you so much for watching. I would love to know if you've read these, what you thought about them, if you'd like to share your favorite book of last year, or books, because, like, obviously, I mean, I do have, like, a most favorite, but I have so many favorites from last year. So if you'd like to share your favorite or favorites, I'd love to hear them. That wraps it up for my favorites of the year, though. I will see you later. Goodbye.